Good evening. This is Nathan Cross with American Daily News, and if you look at what just happened between Washington and Ottawa in the last 72 hours, it doesn't look like a negotiation. It doesn't look like a compromise. It looks like a detonation. For 3 decades, the Great Lakes were an economic engine shared by 2 nations. Factories on one side, refineries on the other, trucks rolling across bridges 24 hours a day like a heartbeat. That heartbeat just flatlined. Donald Trump thought the tariffs would bring Canada crawling back. He thought a week of economic pressure would crack Mark Carney like it cracked every other opponent he's faced. He thought wrong. Because Mark Carney didn't just hold the line, he moved it. He moved it forward. And the shockwave from that move is now rippling through Wall Street, through the energy markets, through the Pentagon, and straight into the living rooms of every American family that drives a car, heats a home, or buys groceries. Trump is scrambling. His advisors are leaking. And the thing nobody in Washington wants to admit out loud is now impossible to ignore. Canada just called America's bluff. And America didn't have the cards. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what Carney just did, why it blindsided the White House, and why the next 30 days could reshape the global economy for a generation. So let's rewind the clock. Here's exactly what happened. It started on a Tuesday, 3 days after Trump's 25% auto tariffs officially went into effect. The border slowed. Not stopped, slowed. Trucks that used to clear customs in 11 minutes were sitting for 4 hours. Parts that were supposed to arrive at a GM plant in Flint, Michigan by 6 a.m. didn't arrive until the next day. Ford's Kentucky truck plant sent 1,400 workers home early because a shipment of wiring harnesses from an Ontario supplier got flagged, inspected, delayed, and then flagged again. The tariffs were doing exactly what everyone warned they would do. They were clogging the arteries of the most integrated manufacturing system on Earth. But here's the part nobody expected. On Wednesday morning, Mark Carney called a press conference. Not in Ottawa, not in Parliament. He called it in Calgary, oil country. He stood in front of a refinery with the Canadian flag behind him and the Rockies in the distance. And he didn't talk about cars. He didn't talk about tariffs. He announced that Canada was invoking emergency provisions under the Canada Energy Security Act, a law his government had quietly passed just 2 months earlier. Under this act, Canada would begin redirecting 15% of its pipeline capacity away from U.S.-bound routes and toward the Trans Mountain Terminal for export to Asia. 15%, that's roughly 600,000 barrels a day. Gone. Not tomorrow, not next year, within 90 days. The room went silent. Then the markets went insane. This is exactly the kind of strategic move you need to understand if you want to know how economic warfare actually works. If that matters to you, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Because what I'm about to show you is how Canada just weaponized America's energy dependence. Let me show you the receipts. Receipt number 1, the oil shock. Within 2 hours of Carney's announcement, West Texas intermediate crude jumped $9 a barrel. Brent followed. Energy futures contracts for the next quarter spiked so hard that trading was briefly halted on 2 exchanges. Why? Because U.S. refineries, especially the ones on the Gulf Coast, are literally engineered to process Canadian heavy crude. You can't just swap in Saudi light crude. The chemistry doesn't work. The equipment doesn't work. Retooling takes years and costs billions. Carney knows this. He ran the Bank of Canada. He's read every energy audit, every infrastructure report, every vulnerability assessment. He knows exactly which refineries depend on which pipelines. He knows which ones have no alternative supplier. And he just told them the clock is ticking. Gas prices in the Midwest jumped 22 cents overnight. In Minnesota, they jumped 31 cents. And that was just the market reacting to the announcement. The actual supply reduction hasn't even started yet. This is pure anticipation, pure fear. And Carney is weaponizing it. Receipt number 2, the Asian pivot. Now here is where it gets strategic. While the American media was focused on the oil announcement, something else was happening behind the scenes. Canada's trade minister was in Tokyo, not for a photo op, not for a handshake. She was signing a memorandum of understanding with Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. The deal, an accelerated framework for Canadian LNG exports to Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. You have to understand what this means. For years, the U.S. has been the dominant LNG exporter to Asia. It's been a pillar of American energy diplomacy. Trump has bragged about it repeatedly. But Canada has massive natural gas reserves in British Columbia. What they lacked was infrastructure and political will. Carney just provided both. He fast-tracked 3 LNG terminal permits in a single week. Environmental reviews that were supposed to take 2 years got compressed into 90 days under national economic emergency powers. Trump wanted to punish Canada. Instead, he gave Carney the political cover to do something no Canadian leader has been able to do for a decade: build the export infrastructure to sell Canadian energy to the entire Pacific Rim. In trying to squeeze Canada, Trump just pushed Canada into the arms of Asia's biggest energy buyers. And those buyers, they are thrilled. They have been trying to diversify away from U.S. energy dependence for years. Carney just handed them the alternative on a silver platter. Receipt number 3, the Wall Street revolt. This is the one that should terrify the White House. On Thursday morning, a letter was sent to the Speaker of the House. It was signed by the CEOs of 14 major U.S. corporations, not small companies. Ford, General Motors, ExxonMobil, Marathon Petroleum, Dow Chemical, Procter & Gamble. The letter didn't mince words. It said, and I'm quoting from the leaked draft, "The current trajectory of U.S.-Canada trade policy poses an existential threat to North American industrial competitiveness and will result in significant irreversible job losses in the manufacturing and energy sectors within 120 days. Existential. Irreversible. Those aren't words CEOs use when they're mildly concerned. Those are words they use when they're staring into an abyss. The letter called for an immediate 180-day suspension of all new tariffs and the appointment of a bipartisan trade envoy to renegotiate with Ottawa. It specifically named Mark Carney as a credible and constructive counterpart. Do you see what happened there? Corporate America just went around the president. They didn't ask Trump's permission. They didn't check with the West Wing. They sent a letter to Congress saying, "Fix this before this man destroys us." Trump responded the way Trump always responds. He attacked. He called the CEOs weak. He called them globalist sellouts. He threatened to use executive orders to block any congressional intervention. But here is the problem. Those CEOs employ 2.3 million Americans. They operate in every swing state. They fund the campaigns of every Republican senator who will be on the ballot next year. Trump can scream all he wants, but when the money talks, the money wins. It always does. This channel exists to break down these power plays so you see what's really happening beyond the headlines. If you found this analysis valuable, hit that like button so more people understand the economic warfare unfolding right now. Because what I'm about to tell you reveals just how deep this crisis goes inside the White House. So let's talk about what's really going on inside the White House. Because the leaks are extraordinary. We are hearing from 3 separate sources inside the West Wing that the economic team is in full revolt. The Treasury Secretary has reportedly told the president directly that the energy retaliation from Canada could trigger a recession in the upper Midwest by Q4. The Commerce Secretary is said to have presented a briefing showing that 340,000 American jobs are directly dependent on Canadian supply chains that are now at risk. And here is the detail that tells you everything. The National Security Council held an emergency meeting on Wednesday night. Not about China, not about Iran, about Canada. They discussed the national security implications of losing access to Canadian energy, Canadian minerals, and Canadian Arctic infrastructure. Someone in that room reportedly said, "We are about to sanction our own heating supply." Trump was not in the meeting. He was at Mar-a-Lago. He was on the phone with a cable news host. His staff is managing a crisis. He is managing his brand. The gap between the crisis and the man who caused it is where the real danger lives. Because decisions are being made right now in real time that will affect the price of gas, the price of food, the availability of jobs, and the stability of the Western Alliance. The person who should be making those decisions is tweeting. Now let's talk about Carney's next move, because he has one and it's devastating. Sources in Ottawa are telling us that Canada is preparing to file a formal challenge at the World Trade Organization, not just against the auto tariffs, against the entire tariff regime. Every single levy Trump has imposed on Canadian goods since taking office. Normally, a WTO challenge is a slow bureaucratic process. It takes years. Nobody cares. But Carney isn't filing the challenge because he expects to win at the WTO. He's filing it because he wants to build a coalition. He wants every country that has been hit by Trump's tariffs, the EU, Japan, South Korea, Australia, the UK, to join Canada's case. He wants to turn a bilateral dispute into a multilateral front. And here's the kicker. They're joining. We are hearing that the European Commission is preparing to file a parallel complaint. The UK's Trade Secretary has issued a statement of solidarity with Ottawa. Japan's Foreign Ministry released a carefully worded statement about the importance of rules-based trade that might as well have been written by Carney's own staff. Trump wanted to isolate Canada. Instead, Canada is isolating Trump. This is the Carney playbook. He doesn't fight the bully head-on. He builds a crowd. He gets everyone else in the room to stand behind him. And then the bully isn't facing one opponent. He's facing 20. It's the same thing Carney did at the Bank of England during Brexit. When the markets panicked, he didn't panic back. He called every central banker in the G7. He coordinated. He calmed. And when the dust settled, the Bank of England was the most trusted institution in the country. He's doing the exact same thing now. Only this time, the institution he's stabilizing isn't a central bank. It's a country. So why should you care? Let me be blunt. If you live in the United States, you are about to feel this in your wallet. If the energy redirect goes through, gas prices in the northern states could rise by $1.20 a gallon by winter. Heating oil in New England, which relies heavily on Canadian supply routes, could spike 40%. If the auto supply chain stays disrupted, new car prices will climb another $4,000 to $6,000 on average. Dealers are already reporting that inventory is tightening. Used car prices, which had just started to come down, are heading back up. If you work in manufacturing in the Great Lakes region, your job is now directly at risk. Not because of China, not because of automation, because your president picked a fight with a country that sends you the parts you need to do your work every single day. And if you're an investor, look at your portfolio. Look at your exposure to industrials, to energy, to auto. The smart money is already moving. They're hedging against exactly this scenario. They've been hedging since Carney's Calgary speech. The dumb money, the people who think this will blow over, they're the ones who are going to get crushed when the next earnings reports come in and every CEO says the same thing. Canada. But beyond the money, beyond the markets, there's something bigger happening here. We are watching the collapse of the assumption that America's neighbors will always cooperate. For 70 years, the United States could count on Canada the way you count on gravity. It was just there. It didn't need to be managed. It didn't need to be maintained. It just worked. Trump treated that relationship like it was disposable, like it was a lease he could renegotiate whenever he wanted. And Carney just showed him that it wasn't a lease, it was a marriage. And you can't bully your spouse into submission without consequences. Canada is not leaving North America. The geography doesn't change, the border doesn't move. But the trust is gone. And trust once broken doesn't come back with a handshake and a press conference. It comes back with decades of consistent behavior. Decades that neither Trump nor Carney will be in office to see through. So where does this end? I see three paths forward. Path one, the slow bleed. Tariffs stay. Retaliation stays. Energy flows start shifting over 6 to 12 months. Both economies take damage. Eventually the pain becomes unbearable. Congress acts. A deal gets done. But the structural damage, the lost contracts, the diverted pipelines, the new Asian partnerships, those don't reverse. America wins the battle but loses the war. Path two, the explosion. Trump escalates further. He invokes national security powers to seize Canadian assets or block Canadian companies from operating in the U.S. Carney responds by fully cutting energy exports. The Great Lakes economy collapses. A constitutional crisis erupts in Washington as governors refuse to enforce federal trade orders that are destroying their states. NATO is functionally dead. The Western alliance fractures into competing blocs. This is the scenario that keeps Pentagon planners up at night. It sounds extreme. 6 months ago, everything that's happened this week sounded extreme. Path three, the off-ramp. Someone in Trump's inner circle, someone with enough clout and enough survival instinct, convinces him to take a quiet deal, not a public surrender, a quiet restructuring. The tariffs get phased out over 12 months. Canada pauses the energy redirect. A new trade framework gets negotiated behind closed doors. Both sides claim victory. The press moves on. I want to believe in path three, but I've watched this White House long enough to know that quiet isn't in the vocabulary. Trump doesn't take off-ramps. He builds more highway. And Carney, for all his calm, has now staked his entire political career on not backing down. He can't fold. His country won't let him. He turned standing up to Trump into a national identity. You can't walk that back. So here we are. Two leaders, two egos, two countries that need each other but can't stand each other. And a machine. A beautiful, complex 30-year-old machine of integrated trade and shared prosperity being torn apart in real time by men who either don't understand what they're breaking or don't care. The question isn't whether this hurts. It's already hurting. The question is whether anyone has the courage to stop it before the damage becomes permanent. Your gas prices are going up. Your grocery bills are going up. Your job might be at risk. And all of it stems from a trade war that didn't need to happen with a neighbor that wanted to cooperate. But Trump needed a fight, and Carney gave him one. Only Trump thought he was fighting a mouse. He's actually fighting a grizzly bear that knows exactly where America's vital organs are. If you want to stay ahead of how this unfolds, make sure you're subscribed and that notification bell is on so you get alerts the moment we post. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Carney has overplayed his hand? Or do you think he's the first leader in a decade to play it exactly right? Is Trump about to blink, or is he about to double down into disaster? Let me know what you think. And if this breakdown helped you understand what's really happening beyond the headlines, hit that like button. I'm Nathan Cross. This is American Daily News, and that's the situation.